Loretta Amponsa had been gone for 11 days when her bedroom was given to someone else. She had gone to visit her sister in Savannah, a planned trip, a ticket bought in advance, an 11-day stay that had been on the calendar since February, and that her daughter Sasha had known about since February, had helped plan since February, had driven Loretta to the airport for on a Friday morning in June 2022, and hugged her goodbye and said, "Have a good time, Mom. We'll see you when you get back." Loretta had had a good time. She had called from Savannah every 2 days. She had sent photographs of the river and the food and her sister's new garden. She had felt, for 11 days, like a woman who had a home to return to, and a daughter who was managing things while she was gone. She had landed at Hartsfield on a Sunday afternoon. Sasha had not come to the airport. She had a work thing, she had said. So Loretta had taken a rideshare. She had let herself into the house with her key. She had set her suitcase in the front hall. She had walked down the corridor to her bedroom to unpack. The door had been closed. She had opened it. There had been a man asleep in her bed. She had stood in the doorway of her own bedroom, looking at a person she had never seen in her life asleep in her bed, under her comforter, with his shoes on the floor beside her nightstand. And she had been quiet for long enough that the man had not woken up, and she had closed the door, and she had gone to the kitchen, and she had sat down. Sasha had come home 30 minutes later. She had come in through the front door and found Loretta at the kitchen table and had known, from the quality of the silence in that kitchen, that whatever she had planned to say had arrived too late. She had said, "His name is Devin. He needed a place to stay. I didn't think you'd be using the room." Loretta had looked at her. Sasha had said, "It's just temporary. He's had a hard time. I was trying to help him." Loretta had said, "Sasha, I was gone for 11 days. This is my house." Sasha had said, I know, Mom. "But you have the spare room," Loretta had said. "Sasha, this is my house." She had said it a second time, not because she was angry, though she was, but because she needed to hear how the sentence sounded when she said it clearly, without softening. To her own daughter, in her own kitchen, in a house that she had bought 12 years ago, and that Sasha had lived in rent-free for 3 of those years, following a difficult period in her late 20s. She needed to hear it without apology, which was a new experience, because Loretta had been apologizing for taking up space in her own home for 3 years of Sasha's residency, and had only recently understood that the apologizing had been going in the wrong direction. Devin had moved out the following week, at Sasha's arrangement, without incident. He had been polite. He had apologized to Loretta directly, which she had appreciated more than anything Sasha had said during the entire episode, because Devin at least understood that an apology was owed. Sasha had not apologized. Not directly. Not in the way that acknowledges the specific thing that was done. She had said, "I thought you'd be fine with it." She had said, "You weren't using it." She had said, "You're never home anyway." She had said things that were individually defensible and collectively constituted a portrait of a daughter who had come, somewhere in 3 years of free rent, to understand her mother's home as a shared resource rather than a person's primary and sacred space. Loretta had not gone back to sleep in that bedroom for 6 weeks. She had slept in the spare room. Not because Devin had done anything to the bedroom. It was clean. The sheets had been changed. But because the bedroom had briefly been someone else's, and she needed to decide whether it was hers again before she slept in it. She had decided eventually. She had moved back in, but it had taken 6 weeks and a specific internal conversation about what she was allowed to require from her own home. And that conversation had been harder than any conversation she had had in the 3 years Sasha had been living there. Nobody in that studio knew that the woman at the podium had returned from a trip to find a stranger asleep under her comforter. Loretta had not told anyone the full story for 3 months. She had told her sister in Savannah eventually, the same sister who had hosted the 11-day visit, who had heard about Devin in the initial phone call, and who had said immediately, "Loretta, that is not acceptable." Loretta had said, "I know." Her sister had said, "Does Sasha know?" Loretta had said, "That is the complicated part." Her sister had said, "It is not complicated. It is your house." She had come to Family Feud because her friend Pauline had submitted the application after hearing the story, had said it had been sitting too long without an audience, and had shown up at Loretta's door on a Saturday morning with the taping confirmation and the team she had assembled. Pauline herself, Loretta's daughter-in-law Angela, Angela's mother Beatrice, and Loretta's church friend Cecilia, who had one of those laughs that made any room lighter just by being in it. Steve Harvey got to Loretta during the intro and asked what she did. Retired social worker, 28 years. He said social work was one of the most demanding and least recognized professions in the country, and asked what the most important skill was. She said, "Knowing the difference between someone who needs help and someone who has learned that help is owed to them. They look similar from the outside. They are not similar at all." Steve looked at her. He said, "Did someone cross that line with you?" She looked at Pauline. Pauline raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." And Loretta Amponsa told Steve Harvey about 11 days in Savannah and an airport rideshare and a door and a man she had never seen in her life asleep under her comforter. She told him about the kitchen table and the sentence she had said twice. She told him about the 6 weeks in the spare room. She told him about Devin's apology versus Sasha's explanation. She said, "I was a social worker for 28 years. I know what it looks like when someone who needed help was helped past the point of helping and into the point of entitlement. And I know what it looks like when the person who became entitled is your own daughter. And I know that I contributed to it because I never required anything. I made myself so easy to use that she forgot to ask." She said, "I slept in the spare room for 6 weeks, and then I moved back into my bedroom. And that was the decision that changed things." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey had stepped back from the podium. "You slept in the spare room for 6 weeks, he said. "Yes." "In your own house?" "Yes." "Before you moved back in?" "Yes." "What made you move back in?" She said, "I looked at the bedroom from the doorway and I said, 'That is my room. I paid for it. I kept it. I live here. And no one, not Devin, not Sasha, not anyone's difficult circumstances, gets to make me a guest in my own house. I walked in. I made the bed. I slept in it.' 300 people made a sound." Steve Harvey pressed his handkerchief to his face. He sat down on the edge of the stage. He looked at Loretta with the expression that appears when something has been said that is both very simple and very important, and deserves to be held for a moment before anything else happens. He said, "You walked in. You made the bed. You slept in it." She said, "Yes." He said, "That's it. That's the whole thing." He stood up. "Let me tell you something," he said. "I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo, sleeping in that car, showering at gas stations, eating whatever I could find. And when I came out the other side, when I finally had a place that was mine, I understood what it meant to have a space that no one was allowed to take without permission. I understood it the way you only understand things that have been taken from you. And I know the specific work it takes to walk back into a room that has been occupied by someone who didn't ask. You made the bed. That was an act of reclaiming. That was you deciding the room was yours again." He looked at Loretta. "And now we are going to make sure the rest of the house is yours in the same way." Stop everything, Steve said. He was already moving. We are stopping the game. This has never happened in the 45-year history of this show. He walked Loretta to the front of the stage and asked, "What does the house need to be fully yours again?" She said, "Sasha needs to understand what she did. Not the logistics, she knows the logistics. She needs to understand the principle, that my space is mine. That helping someone does not mean borrowing the thing I need most without asking." Steve nodded. He pulled out his phone. He called a family boundaries specialist his foundation worked with, Liv, on speaker, the whole room hearing. He explained the situation in 4 sentences. 30-year-old daughter living in mother's home, rent-free, unauthorized use of primary bedroom during mother's absence, absence of direct apology, 3-year pattern of space erosion. The specialist said, "This is a classic boundary collapse in an extended cohabitation situation. The longer the free arrangement continues without explicit terms, the more the child's entitlement calcifies." She said, "I can work with both of them. This is very solvable if both people are willing to be honest." Steve arranged sessions and covered all costs through his foundation. He then looked at the stage and said, to the room and to the cameras, "And I want to say one more thing. Sasha is watching this. I believe she is watching. And I want to say to her, your mother is a social worker. She has spent 28 years knowing the difference between someone who needs help and someone who has learned help is owed. She knows which one you became, and she loves you enough to be honest about it on a stage instead of swallowing it in her own kitchen. That is not a failure of motherhood. That is motherhood working correctly." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the competing family, the Boateng family from Charlotte, and their matriarch, Akosua, who had been nodding throughout the last 8 minutes with the steady nod of someone who recognizes every detail of a story, crossed the stage and stood in front of Loretta. She said, "I changed the locks." Loretta looked at her. Akosua said, "Different situation, same principle. It is your house. Change whatever needs changing." Both families received the full $25,000 prize. Steve Harvey looked at Loretta Amponsa, at the bedroom she had walked back into, at every camera, and said 5 words. She made the bed, hers. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the detail of the 6 weeks in the spare room, and the morning Loretta walked back in and made the bed, became the most shared moment of the episode. It reached 240 million views in 9 days. The hashtag #SheMadeTheBed was used by mothers, daughters, and anyone who had ever had to decide, with deliberate intention, that a space belonged to them. Housing advocates, family counselors, and adult-child-parent relationship therapists all shared the clip. Several financial advice platforms used it to discuss rent-free adult-child living arrangements and the importance of explicit terms. 3 months after the taping, Sasha attended the first family session with the boundaries specialist. Loretta has said only this: "She was more honest than I expected. I was more specific than I've ever been. We are working on it." 6 months after the taping, Sasha moved out. Not because she was asked to, because she decided to. She found a 1-bedroom apartment 4 miles away. She paid the first month's rent herself. She sent Loretta a text that said, "I needed to have my own space to understand what yours means. I'm sorry it took a game show." Loretta texted back, "Come for dinner on Sunday." She has come every Sunday since. A year after the taping, Loretta Amponsa's bedroom is exactly as she has always kept it. The comforter is hers. The nightstand is hers. The room smells the way it has always smelled. A specific combination of the cedar closet and the lotion she uses, and the particular quality of morning light through the east-facing window that she has woken up to for 12 years. She made the bed this morning. She makes it every morning. She says it still means what it meant the first time. The Loretta Initiative, established through Steve Harvey's foundation, provides family cohabitation counseling and boundary navigation resources for parents and adult children sharing homes, specifically focusing on the moment when help becomes entitlement and how to recover the relationship before it calcifies. In its first year, the initiative served more than 600 families. Its motto came from Loretta's own words. I walked in. I made the bed. I slept in it. Today, Loretta Ampanza's house is hers. It has been hers for 12 years, and it will be hers for as many more as she lives in it. She has a guest room, which is available for guests who are invited. She has a bedroom, which is hers. The difference between those two sentences is the thing she is teaching Sasha, slowly, on Sunday dinners, with the patience of a woman who spent 28 years knowing the difference between someone who needs help and someone who has learned it is owed. She says Sasha is learning. She says the learning is going in the right direction. She says that is enough. Have you ever had to walk back into a room and decide it was yours? Have you ever chosen yourself when the people you love forgot to ask permission? Share your story in the comments. If this moment moved you, subscribe and share with someone who needs to know that making the bed is always allowed. Ring that notification bell for more stories of people who walked back in.